If I asked you to guess how many highly advanced alien civilizations exist right now, just within our own Milky Way galaxy, you might, I don't know, toss out a conservative number, like a handful maybe. A dozen, if you're feeling really optimistic. Try 18,000.
Yeah, and the wildest part is we might already have, the physical evidence that they were here, like walking right alongside our ancestors.
Right, which sounds completely like science fiction. But that number is actually rooted in some remarkably grounded mathematical probability, isn't it?
It is. The researchers we're looking at for this deep dive, they start with a pretty basic astronomical baseline. So roughly 30 billion stars in the Milky Way.
Okay, 30 billion.
Right. And from there, they just filter it down. They estimate 18 billion of those stars have planetary systems. Then you filter that down to planets orbiting at the right distance to avoid being incinerated or, frozen solid.
Habitable zone.
Exactly. And you get about 180 million. So if you assume life emerges on just 1% of those, you have 1.8 million planets with biology. And if you take just 1% of those, where life reaches a level of intelligence and, technological capability equal to Homo sapiens, that leaves you with 18,000 highly advanced civilizations just in our local galactic neighborhood.
Okay, let me pause you right there because my immediate instinct is to push back on the biology side of this.
Oh, sure.
Whenever we talk about the search for extraterrestrial life, we always frame it around Earth-like conditions. Like, we assume you absolutely need liquid water, an oxygen-rich atmosphere, a very specific barometric pressure.
Right, the classic Goldilocks zone.
Yeah. If a planet is covered in toxic gas or sits near absolute zero, we just write it off as a dead rock.
Which is, it's just standard Earth-centric bias. Because if you look at the biochemical research in the source material, that assumption completely falls apart.
It really does.
Take Dr. Sanford Siegel, for instance. He's a biochemist who ran this fascinating experiment where he basically recreated the atmosphere of Jupiter inside his lab.
So we're talking about a completely lethal, toxic soup of, ammonia, methane, and hydrogen.
Exactly. And he introduced various strains of bacteria into this environment, totally expecting them to perish instantly. But instead, certain extremophile bacteria didn't just survive, they actually thrived and multiplied.
Wait, really? In Jupiter's atmosphere?
Yeah, they utilized entirely different chemical pathways for their metabolic processes, totally bypassing the need for oxygen.
So biological life can essentially, hotwire its own engine to run on completely different fuel.
Precisely. And it's not just chemical extremes either, it's temperature too.
Wow.
There was a study by entomologists Hinton and Bloom on a specific species of midge.
Right, the insects.
Yeah, they literally dehydrated these insects by baking them at 100 degrees Celsius for hours. Then they took those dried husks and plunged them into liquid helium.
Which is a temperature indistinguishable from the freezing vacuum of deep space.
Right. And when they gradually returned the insects to normal atmospheric conditions, the midges rehydrated, resumed entirely normal biological functions, and even produced healthy offspring.
That is just insane. Their cellular structures simply suspended activity rather than taking damage.
Exactly.
Which means the universe is infinitely more hospitable than we give it credit for. And if life doesn't need a cozy, Earth-like incubator to evolve, then the probability of those 18,000 civilizations isn't just some math trick. It's almost a statistical inevitability.
It really is.
And that sets up the overarching mission for our deep dive today. Humanity has finally entered the space age. We have rockets, satellites, orbital capsules, spacesuits.
We have the vocabulary now.
Yes. For the first time in human history, we actually have the technological vocabulary to look back at our own ancient archaeological mysteries and recognize what we might be seeing. It's like we're waking up from a collective amnesia.
That's a great way to put it. We're no longer looking at the past through the lens of mythology. We're looking at it through the lens of engineering. The hypothesis we're unpacking today is provocative, sure, but it's essential to consider. What if the deities and, the gods recorded by ancient human civilizations were actually extraterrestrial astronauts?
And more importantly, what if they left physical blueprints behind?
Exactly.
Because if we're going to look for blueprints from an advanced spacefaring civilization, the very first thing they would do upon arriving at a new planet is survey it, right? They would need a map.
A highly detailed map.
Right. And since we now have our own satellites orbiting the Earth, we know exactly what a planetary survey from space looks like. Which brings us to the Piri Reis map.
Ah, yes. The Piri Reis map is just one of the most baffling anomalies in modern archaeology. It was discovered in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul in the early 18th century.
Okay.
It belonged to a highly respected Ottoman admiral, Piri Reis, who openly stated he compiled his map by combining data from much, much older source maps, some dating back to antiquity.
So he was piecing together ancient fragments.
Right. And fast forward to the mid-20th century, an American cartographer named Arlington H. Mallory, along with the U.S. Navy, began analyzing it. But they ran into a major problem. The map didn't make sense on a flat plane.
Because, obviously, the Earth isn't flat. You have to account for the curvature of the globe.
Exactly. They had to use a modern grid projection to transfer the 2D data onto a 3D sphere. And when they did, they found something that should be historically impossible.
Oh, this is the part that blows my mind.
The map accurately details the coastlines of North and South America. But far more shockingly, it outlines the subglacial mountain ranges of Antarctica.
Okay, just to be incredibly clear on why that is so impossible for the listeners, Antarctica has been buried under a mile-thick sheet of solid ice for thousands of years.
Millennia.
Yeah, we didn't even discover those specific mountain ranges until 1952. And we only found them by dragging advanced echo-sounding sonar arrays across the ice pack to measure the seismic returns from the bedrock below. Yet an 18th century admiral had a map of them.
It's staggering. The topographical data is undeniable. But the analysis of how the map was actually drawn is where the extraterrestrial perspective comes into play.
The distortion, right?
Yeah. The researchers noticed a highly specific longitudinal distortion on the Piri Reis map. South America and Africa look elongated in a very peculiar, curved manner. To understand why, modern cartographers compared the map to composite photographs taken by U.S. satellites.
Let me guess, it's an exact match.
It is an identical match. When a satellite is positioned at an extreme high altitude, like directly over Cairo, Egypt, the camera lens has to capture the spherical shape of the Earth below it.
Wow.
This creates an azimuthal equidistant projection. The land masses directly below the lens are perfectly proportioned, but as you look outward toward the edges of the globe, the curvature of the Earth warps and stretches the continents in a very specific mathematical way.
So it's basically stretching the edges.
Exactly. And the Piri Reis map perfectly replicates the spherical trigonometry and optical distortion of a photograph taken from orbit.
It's like rendering a 3D video game environment onto a flat television screen. The objects on the far edges of your peripheral vision get warped because the software is trying to compress a sphere onto a plane.
That's a perfect analogy.
You're telling me an ancient map possesses the exact spherical rendering bugs of a modern high-altitude satellite.
That is the unavoidable conclusion of the geometry.
Okay, let's follow that logical thread for a second. If an advanced civilization was orbiting the Earth, mapping the topography, taking sonar readings of subglacial bedrock, they couldn't just stay in orbit forever, right? Eventually, physical astronauts need to land.
They need infrastructure.
Exactly, which means they would leave marks on the ground. Do we see anything that looks like an ancient landing pad?
Oh, absolutely. For that, we have to travel to the Palpa Valley in the Andes Mountains of Peru, specifically the region containing the Nazca lines.
The Nazca lines are fascinating.
They really are. But the geography here is crucial to understand. The Palpa Valley is a massive, completely flat plain of rust-colored stone, highly oxidized by the sun. But beneath this dark surface layer is a much lighter, yellowish subsoil.
So if you scrape away the top layer, you leave a bright, permanent mark that can be seen from miles away.
Exactly. And carved into this massive plain, which is roughly 60 kilometers long and 1.6 kilometers wide, are these intersecting geometric lines.
60 kilometers long. That is massive.
It's huge. And some of these lines run perfectly straight and parallel for miles.
Yeah.
Others form massive interlocking rectangles and trapezoids. Traditional archaeology often dismisses these as ancient Inca road systems used for religious processions.
But roads imply a destination, you know? When you look at aerial photos of Nazca, these massive, miles-long geometric strips just end abruptly in the middle of a barren desert.
They go nowhere.
Right. They don't connect cities, they don't navigate around mountains, they just form a massive flat grid. It doesn't look like a highway, it looks exactly like an international airport tarmac.
It really does. When surveyed from the air, the layout is remarkably similar to modern runway configurations. The hypothesis is that this flat, barren stretch of oxidized stone was deliberately cleared to serve as a massive visual beacon and a physical landing strip for extraterrestrial craft.
And it's in a place where it wouldn't wash away.
Right. The region is practically devoid of wind and rain, meaning whatever was carved there would remain undisturbed for millennia.
Okay, but if they were landing craft that required massive, miles-long runways, we are talking about heavy industrial-scale machinery.
Definitely.
And if we look just a short distance away from Nazca, we actually find evidence of heavy industry that completely breaks our understanding of ancient engineering. I'm talking about the ruins of Tiahuanaco and the fortress of Sacsayhuaman.
Oh, the anomalies at Sacsayhuaman absolutely defy conventional mechanics. I mean, we find perfectly smooth water pipes bored through solid stone, suggesting the use of advanced rotary drills.
Not primitive chisels.
No, not at all. We see massive sandstone blocks held together by copper clamps. And that alone is astounding, because to create a flush copper clamp, you have to carve negative grooves into two separate stones, align them perfectly, and then pour molten copper into the joint to lock them together.
Which implies they had portable blast furnaces and metallurgical knowledge far beyond what primitive stone tool societies should have had.
Exactly. But the real showstopper at Sacsayhuaman is the 20,000-ton block.
Oh, this is the part that I just can't wrap my head around.
There is a single, heavily machined block of stone there, estimated to weigh 20,000 tons. It features beautifully carved, precision-cut staircases and circular drill holes.
Let's just pause and visualize the physics of 20,000 tons. That is the equivalent of a multi-story modern office building made of solid, dense bedrock.
It's incomprehensibly heavy.
You cannot move that with wooden rollers and braided grass ropes. The frictional coefficient of stone on stone combined with the shear stress would snap primitive cables like thread.
But the craziest part isn't even its weight. It's the orientation, right? Yeah. The block is sitting completely upside down. The perfectly carved stairs are pointing straight into the earth.
It's like trying to hoist a modern freight train using only copper chisels and good intentions and somehow flipping it end over end.
It's absurd.
It really highlights the absolute absurdity of attributing this to manual slave labor. Something massive with unbelievable kinetic output. Flip that rock.
And we might actually have the chemical signature of that kinetic output, because just 800 meters away from the fortress, there is an area spanning roughly 16,000 square meters where the rock has been vitrified.
Explain vitrification for us, because this isn't just like a big fire pit.
No, not at all. Vitrification occurs when stone or silica sand is subjected to a sudden catastrophic burst of extreme thermal radiation temperatures exceeding 1,700 degrees Celsius.
Oh, wow.
The rock literally melts and fuses into solid glass. This is not the result of a slow-moving volcanic lava flow. This requires a flash heating event.
A sudden burst.
Right. We see this exact same type of vitrified glass in the sands of the Gobi Desert, and most tellingly, we find it at modern atomic bomb test sites in Nevada.
Trinitite. The glass left behind when a nuclear blast melts the desert floor. So we have orbital mapping, miles-long landing strips, mechanical stonework, and thermal anomalies identical to nuclear blasts.
It paints a very specific picture.
It really does.
Yeah.
But if this hypothesis holds and advanced beings were operating heavy machinery on Earth, how did the primitive humans living at the time process it? Like, what happens when a hunter-gatherer meets an astronaut?
Well, they do what any human mind does when faced with incomprehensible data. They create a mythology to frame it. Sociologists refer to this as a cargo cult dynamic.
Yes, this is a phenomenal concept. I love this. It's exactly like what happened in the Pacific Islands during World War II, right?
Exactly.
Isolated indigenous tribes saw American military planes dropping massive crates of food, radios, and supplies. And when the war ended and the planes left, the islanders built life-size replicas of airplanes and air traffic control towers out of bamboo and palm fronds.
They mimicked what they saw.
Yeah, they performed military marching drills, hoping that by mimicking the rituals of the soldiers, they could summon the gods in the sky to return with more cargo.
That is the perfect modern parallel. Now, just apply that cognitive dissonance to the ancient world. An extraterrestrial ship descends with a deafening roar of propulsion. Beings emerge wearing pressurized suits or helmets with antennas.
Right.
If these beings use a high-powered searchlight, the primitive observer writes a hymn about a god who turns the night into day.
Wow, yeah.
If an astronaut uses a rocket belt or a jetpack to cross a chasm, The human observer records a deity exhibiting divine levitation.
Because they didn't have words like combustion or propulsion or electronics, so they use the only words they have: magic, chariots of fire, and miracles.
And these visitors seemingly utilize that awe to establish authority. Ancient texts from multiple continents frequently mention deities speaking through a speaking door or a voice booming from a metallic object.
Which is clearly a description of a loudspeaker or a radio transceiver.
Yeah. Exactly. And using this manufactured godlike status, they imparted foundational knowledge, teaching basic agriculture, mathematics, and moral codes, essentially jump-starting human civilization before departing.
And the humans left behind recorded these encounters in their oldest texts. Like, look at the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's widely considered one of the earliest pieces of surviving literature carved into clay tablets.
Yeah.
In the 5th tablet, there is a sequence where the character Enkidu is physically taken on a flight by a god.
Right. Enkidu is taken high into the atmosphere. The deity instructs him to look down at the earth and the sea below. And Enkidu describes the land masses looking like porridge and the massive oceans looking like water puddles.
This detail is just brilliant to me, because if you try to explain the concept of Wi-Fi to a 19th century blacksmith, they're going to write down a story about a magical, invisible anvil in the sky.
Right, they use their own reference points.
Exactly. Enkidu is using the vocabulary of a Bronze Age farmer to describe atmospheric scattering and the curvature of the earth. No one standing on a mountain invents the specific visual of continents looking like clumps of porridge in a water puddle.
No, you only get that optical perspective from extreme high altitude.
Yes.
And we find equally literal depictions in ancient visual art, too. Take the tomb lid of Kinish Janab Pakal, discovered in the Mayan temple of Palenque.
Well, this is a huge one.
Traditional archaeology interprets the intricate stone carving as symbolic religious imagery, like the king descending into the underworld. But viewed through a modern engineering lens, the carving depicts a startlingly mechanical diagram.
It is a direct, schematic depiction of a primitive astronaut in a flight capsule. I mean, the figure is leaning forward in a contoured seat. He's manipulating a complex series of controls with his hands. His feet are braced on pedals.
He's very specific.
He even has some sort of breathing apparatus or communication tube near his nose, and at the bottom of the device, there are distinct depictions of flames and exhaust thrusting downward. It looks exactly like a cross-section of a Mercury or Apollo space capsule.
It really does. And this mechanical interpretation aligns perfectly with the broader Mayan culture because the Mayans were utterly obsessed with the cosmos.
Right, their calendars.
Their entire society was structured around tracking celestial bodies with terrifying precision, driven by a deep-seated belief that these gods would return from the stars.
And the math they achieved without telescopes or modern instruments is just staggering.
It is. They utilized a highly complex vigesimal or base 20 mathematical system. Through generational, unbroken observational tracking, they calculated the synodic period of Venus at exactly 584 days.
Okay.
And they calculated the solar Earth year at 365.2420 days.
Just for context for you listening, today, using highly advanced atomic clocks and orbital telemetry, we calculate the Earth year at 365.2422 days. The Mayans, using stone buildings and the naked eye, were off by 2/10,000ths of a decimal point.
It's unbelievable. And their calendar systems didn't just track the local seasons either. They worked with massive cyclical calendars stretching 400 million years into the past.
400 million.
Yeah. Every pyramid, every plaza, every observatory they built was mathematically aligned to this cosmic schedule. They were waiting for Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, to return.
Which makes sense, because a metallic craft flying through the atmosphere with a trailing exhaust plume would easily be described as a serpent with glowing feathers or scales.
Exactly. But the tragic part of the Mayan story is what happened when the calendar ran out.
Right. They just left, didn't they?
Around 600 AD, at the absolute height of their civilization, the Mayans simply vanished. They abandoned their thriving, fully built megacities to the jungle. The archaeological record shows no evidence of a massive war, no prolonged climate disaster, no catastrophic plague.
So what caused the collapse?
A psychological and cognitive collapse. The researchers proposed that they built these cities strictly as way stations, waiting for the gods' return date dictated by their calendars. When the grand cycle finally finished and the sky remained empty, the entire foundational purpose of their society evaporated.
Wow.
Without the return of the gods, the cities had no meaning. So they simply walked away.
It is a haunting image. A brilliantly advanced civilization waiting on the tarmac for a cosmic flight that never arrived. But it begs a massive question for us today. We can sit here and debate the interpretation of stone carvings in ancient myths all day long. How do we actually prove any of this?
The researchers argue that we need a radical shift in our scientific approach, proposing what they call a utopian archaeology year.
Utopian archaeology, what does that mean?
The premise is that we need to stop treating archaeology as just, digging up pottery shards and categorizing arrowheads. We need to unleash the full force of modern hard science laboratories on our ancient past.
What does that look like practically? Like, give me the actual mechanics of how we test this.
It means using mass spectrometry and isotope analysis on ancient metallurgy. For example, archaeologists have found ancient artifacts in China and Peru containing aluminum and platinum.
Which is a problem because of how hard it is to extract, right?
Right. Extracting aluminum from bauxite ore requires the Hall-Héroult process, which relies on massive industrial electrical currents and temperatures over 1,000 degrees Celsius. It simply cannot be done with a primitive wood fire.
Right.
So if we use mass spectrometry to analyze the atomic structure of these metals, we can definitively prove whether they were forged by an electric arc or a primitive forge.
And it's not just metals either.
Exactly. It means sending physicists to the Dead Sea Basin to use thermoluminescence dating and radiation detection on the soil where the biblical cities of Sodom and Gomorrah allegedly stood.
Testing for anomalous radioactive decay chains that would prove an ancient nuclear event.
Yes. It means using advanced optical interferometry to decode how ancient crystal lenses found in Iraq were ground and polished without modern lathing equipment.
The beautiful irony here is that the very technology we developed to fulfill our dreams of space travel, microelectronics, radiation shielding, mass spectrometry, are the exact tools we need to analyze the dirt beneath our feet.
Exactly.
We had to learn how to fly to the stars just to understand the footprints left in our own backyard.
That's a great way to put it. And ultimately, the core lesson of this entire deep dive is intellectual humility. The researchers urge us to reject historical dogma and approach the past with open, critical minds.
Because things can change in an instant.
Right. If humanity lands a rover on Mars tomorrow and we discover a single ruined foundation or a single artificial tool carved from stone, it will instantly shatter every textbook we have ever written about the history of the universe.
Yeah.
But the evidence we are so desperate to find on Mars might already be sitting in a museum in Cairo or buried under a jungle canopy in Peru, completely misunderstood because we've been examining it with the wrong framework.
It's all about perspective. And I want to wrap up by expanding on an incredible thought experiment from the research that really drives this home. In 1965, a Westinghouse time capsule was buried at the World's Fair in New York.
Oh, I love this example.
It is packed with everyday items designed to survive a global catastrophe and preserve our knowledge for people 5,000 years in the future.
Right. Now, imagine if our civilization is wiped out, and 5,000 years from now, a new society of future archaeologists digs up our ruins. Because they lack the context of electricity or our specific digital technology, they will misinterpret everything. They might excavate the New York subway tunnels and confidently declare them to be massive subterranean labyrinths built for geometric religious rituals.
Right.
They would uncover our televisions and smartphones and, having no electrical grid to power them, dismiss them as polished black mirrors used in vanity cults.
They would read surviving texts describing massive metal birds that carried hundreds of people across the ocean in a single day, or magic screens that allowed you to speak to someone on the other side of the planet, and they would just laugh.
They'd think it was mythology.
Exactly. They would classify those stories as primitive fairy tales, dismissing them simply because, in their minds, such things are scientifically impossible.
They would be entirely blind to the reality of our technology, just as we might be entirely blind to the reality of ancient astronaut technology today.
Because to them, our everyday lives would look exactly like magic. So to you listening, the next time you look up at a commercial airplane, or pull out your smartphone, or watch a satellite launch, ask yourself a question. How will humanity translate this moment in 5,000 years? Will we be the gods at the center of someone else's cargo cult? Keep questioning the narrative, keep digging for the truth, and keep your eyes on the stars. We'll catch you on the next one.